Hey guys, what's up? It's your boy, The Night Justice, back again with another Power Scaler video for 2026. I know it's been a long time since I posted a video, and with a lot of things going on in my life, I had a really hard time to upload and keep it more consistent. But I'm gonna try to do better and bring out more videos in and out throughout the year. But why not kick off the year with a very interesting topic involving the series known as Record of Ragnarok. I've covered this series on my channel involving Zeus, Raiden, and Hajun. But why not get back into it with some more interesting topics that actually been brought up and argued throughout the community involving two of the greatest swordsmen in the series. Sasaki Kojiro, humanity's greatest loser that represented round 3, and the demon child Okita Souji, who represented round 10. Both these characters have quite interesting arguments for who is the strongest out of the two, and some arguments for who is the strongest throughout the verse. Some say Kojiro is top 1, while others say that Okita Souji is top 1. But from what I see, I'm not going to be biased or show favoritism between the two characters. I'm going to break this down, give a fair description on who wins and who overall is the greatest swordsman in humanity. But if you're a first time watcher or you watch my videos or have not subscribed yet, please hit like, share, and subscribe. And also comment down below for what more Record of Ragnarok or content you want me to cover in the near future of 2026. Now, let's get into it and find out who is truly the greatest swordsman in all of human history. Starting up with Kojiro. Kojiro is straight up called the strongest swordsman and called unrivaled by Musashi Miyamoto, and saying he's unparalleled under the heavens, and this is referring to base Kojiro, not the one we see at the end of the fight when he fully scans creation. Poseidon is betrayed being on the same tier as Zeus, being called the Zeus of the seas. Hilda couldn't think of anyone who could face the sea god, and her only choice at the time in which she could think of would be the likes of Leonidas, Queen Shi Huang, and Nostradamus. But Kojiro chose himself, and she has full confidence in him. While Kojiro scans the arena and scans Poseidon, he sees that no matter what he does, he dies in the face of the sea god. Poseidon doesn't see him as a threat, and Kojiro thinks that what he can do is decides to use his ultimate scan technique. His ultimate technique, Tameshi Gamashi, what Ares calls it fast attack, and he beats Poseidon's swing. When Poseidon uses Epic Strike, Kojiro using his scan ability where he held the states how it works. That Kojiro analyzes the person's breath, the way they blink, move, and by doing this, he starts to scan the arena. Saying he faced the images countless times and simulate all the thousands of attacks and the pattern would proceed, with being compared to Adam as the ultimate counter, with Kojiro being the ultimate scanner. Poseidon moves so fast that Kojiro can read it, but can barely react to it. Poseidon being called the god of gods, the king of the sea proceeds to show a little of what he can do with his divine lightning. Ares comments that this technique is blinding in speed, and Ares states that what we've seen up until now is a bit of Poseidon's true power, and the true depths of his strength remains unknown to the gods. As Kojiro is being overwhelmed, he starts to adapt to the attacks. In his 1,000 image defense, Kojiro's sword has already surpassed the limits of humanity and stepped into the realm of the gods. Poseidon then outmaneuvers him by reading his own reaction and aiming at his blind spots. Kojiro gets overwhelmed again by the sea god, but finds the resolve and predicts his faster movements by using his Genryu style Tiger Claw to try and end it. But the sea god casually breaks his Volander and outmaneuvers him again. Kojiro, after getting his Volander shattered, finds the resolve, and by being pushed into a corner, he evolves and re-Volander and made his twin sword, Nimto Genryu. When you get into another clash between the two, Poseidon and Kojiro, where he starts scanning even deeper into the fight. Musashi then explains that even in death, thousands of times, 10,000s of times, fighting to the death, being training in the afterlife his opponent, Kojiro then uses the fighting styles of his former opponents to fight Poseidon and starts overwhelming the sea god. He is stated again to be unparalleled under the heavens with his true strength of his Nimto Genryu. Poseidon then starts to get serious and straight up moves so fast that Heimdall couldn't even see the strike. Kojiro starts to use his 1,000 scan defense to scan him again, because he is being output by more power and more speed. He can react to it in time, he can even see it, and then uses his 40-day flood and moves so fast that Ares can't even see it. Kojiro gets overwhelmed by the 40-day flood and then thinks of losing is nothing new to him, and just in the same way as always. Kojiro gets the resolve again by hearing all of those that have lived by the sword cheering for him and his name, and he gets up, starts fighting back, and the flash of pain and the fire that burns in his brain, every drop of blood that drips from his body just makes Kojiro stronger. Poseidon gets more serious, and when humanity's sword finally reaches the bottom of the abyss, Kojiro scans deeper. The vibrations in the air, the slightest tremble of the earth. As he scans all of creation at once, Kojiro grew so strong that at this point he effortlessly dodges all of Poseidon's techniques. Kind of like Ultra Instinct Goku in a way, with Ares commenting how many thousands of steps ahead is he reading. Kojiro gets so close in and effortlessly kills Poseidon, ending the fight. After the fight ending, Zeus states that Kojiro grew so strong he was actually stronger than Poseidon at this point. Now, going off this fight, we see that Kojiro was quite a skilled and very powerful swordsman. He definitely earned his title as a master swordsman in his day, seeing that he can scan an opponent and grow stronger as the fight goes on when being pushed into a corner. And it's quite known that in this series that when even the gods and humans are pushed into a corner, they're able to break their limits and soar to even greater heights. Kojiro, being called the greatest swordsman in history, can be interpreted as history up to that point of his era in which he lived, or at the time that he fought the greatest opponents of his time. As we didn't see Okita Souji until later on to the series. If we use the anime, Okita Souji is also called the greatest swordsman in the history of humanity by Brunhilde and Heimdall. Okita has also seen the fights prior, so he shouldn't be like unaware of what Kojiro can do, and he doesn't see Kojiro as inferior, nor does he see himself as inferior to Kojiro. Not to mention these characters, like I said before, grow stronger as the fight goes on, and when they're pushed into a corner, they break their limits. Okita respects Kojiro as a warrior and doesn't look down at him in any way, as they both were interested in fighting Qin Shi Huang, so that would mean they're mostly around like the same tier, so they were both impressed and like down to like fight him, seeing how he is strong. You could take it as they are comparable to each other, and that would be a good fight between the two. Also, it wouldn't make sense for him to be the greatest swordsman in all of human history or human history as a whole, when we get introduced to characters later on whose skill levels on like a higher tier. When you got Susanoo no Mikoto as the greatest swordsman in all of Valhalla, whether it be the gods or the humans and gods in Valhalla, plus you have Okita's era where swordsmanship reached its peak and it was made into an art known as man-killing. So you can take it as Okita being the strongest manslayer as the art, or because he is in the era in which swordsmanship was at its strongest, so the level and skill of especially the masters that lived in that time on the level, or a whole new level as the different eras that came prior. So you can say, like I said before, Kojiro's statement of being the greatest swordsman was good at the time in which he was introduced, and then we get introduced to characters later on in the series whose skill level is on like a whole nother tier. Not to say that he's outright inferior to them, but I wouldn't use a statement of him being the greatest swordsman, as when we get introduced to characters later on that's shown to be like prove otherwise. Now we get into the demon child, Okita Souji. In round 10, it is explained that the Bakumatsu era reached the peak of swordsmanship, where it became the art of manslaying. Among all the manslayers, all the masters who lived during that time, who was the strongest? Naming countless masters in their various feats, but none were stronger than the demon child, with his blade stained the streets of Kyoto, called the strongest manslayer, Okita Souji. Susanoo no Mikoto explains that he was the one who created swordsmanship, and that humans captivated on it throughout the history of mankind. But the swordsmen of the Bakumatsu era stood above all others, and they honed its peak to create the art known as manslaying. Kondo then called Okita the strongest manslayer, the strongest swordsman of that Bakumatsu era, as well as the most feared. Okita then attacked Susanoo, and then pushed his air before he even had a chance of landing the attack. Susanoo and Okita exchanged attacks. He states that as expected by his about his truly Tenjin Ryu style is the strongest sword style in terms for true combat. Now you can interpret as this in two ways, that this style is the strongest swords combat style for Okita Souji, or the strongest sword style overall. We see that Okita has the ability to involve with his red eyes. He reached the peak of excitement in the battle, and his heart beats 3 times faster and pumps more blood that burns his life force quicker. All of his muscle cells in his body are awakened, giving him superhuman abilities. Okita then uses his 3-stage thrust, with Susanoo just barely blocking it, calling it Godspeed, and it is truly a frightening technique. Susanoo then reveals his divine weapon, his sword, Amino no Mikoto no Sarugi, calling it one of the strongest divine weapons in all of Valhalla. It took the combined union of gods and humans to craft this blade. Susanoo then entered his Sengen stance, but it is no ordinary stance, being set by various swordsmen from different lands and eras, or what stand it really is. But the first to notice it, what was really going on, was Okita Souji, followed by the warriors of Bakumatsu, as well as those of the Sengoku era. Musashi and Kojiro say that it is a tremendous and terrifying, that it is everything, the stance of everything. It's called Shinrai Yarozu, all gods in heaven, meaning that every stance, every sword style in this stance exists, it combined into one. So Susanoo that I've learned every sword stance throughout all of humanity, combined them all into one stance. Susanoo and Okita clash, and Okita's speed breaks that of the gods, but Susanoo Shinrai Yarozu cancels it. Their clash is so fierce that the audience doesn't understand what's going on. Susanoo has taken every technique humanity has ever crafted and mastered them entirely. He even reached beyond every single one of those sword styles. Okita entered his no stance, where Musashi compared it to the formless stance, but it's not the same. Kojiro commented that it's not something you can learn in a school. He developed it by living in those death match eras where his life was on the line every day. He began to overwhelm Susanoo to the point where he can't even see the start of the attack and outskills him, landing a clean hit. Musashi then states that a no stance with bloodlust without bloodlust is a state of mind only achieved by a true swordsman after countless life or death battles. Susanoo then uses his trump card, Amino no Amageshi, and take the stance, meaning to cut down the opponent in one blow when entering his range, with even being called the strongest sword swing, a technique only Susanoo can do, given he loved the sword that much. Okita enters a demon child form and dashes at the sword god. Susanoo uses his vacuum sword attack again, but Okita clashes and rolls out the way. It's kind of like rolling with the punch with a boxer. He rolled with the punch, so he rolled with the swing. With the attack with him clashing with Susanoo in the middle and overwhelming him briefly. Okita and Susanoo clash again in close range combat, with Zeus saying that the strongest in a real fight isn't just for show. Now, this doesn't mean the strongest as the strongest character, but you can take it either the strongest swordsman or the strongest manslayer or in Godslayer clashing. Susanoo then tries to hit Okita again with his vacuum blade downwards, but after countless battles and brush with death, as such, Susanoo was able to divert the attack again. Jack says the only way to defeat Susanoo's technique is to destroy the core. Okita tries to throw the sword out off with his speed, but attempts is foolish since all he's doing is giving Susanoo the time to gather more energy. Okita dodged the attack, and by dodging it by a hair, by throwing his sword at the sword god's foot and throwing him off, but even so, it wasn't enough, and the demon child got cut. We learn a little insight on the demon child that Okita has. It is said to be the strongest and most wicked fighting instinct, but the trade-off for this power is that the demon eats away at Okita's body. For such incredible abilities and incredible superhuman abilities, there must be a trade-off, which is his health. After remembering the promise he made to his friends and the condo, as well as agreeing to fight with everything he has, with the demon child, his red eyes turn blue and his sword pressure seems to have no limit, and he becomes a true swordsman. the demon child release. Brunhilde explains that what's going on with him is that the Wunder and what he does. She explains that he became one with the demon child and he carries the entirety of that power within him, being strong enough to burn his entire body. Skip mode, the Valkyrie ability, throws out the past Okita's accumulated sword techniques and what he would have achieved with his sword if he wasn't afflicted by his illness into the future and in the present, and they combine into one, forcing them to become like together in the moment, using it to create the ultimate body for a swordsman, the ability known as sword time. Okay. Okita attacks Susanoo using different techniques in the combined assault, blitzing the sword god and making it impossible for him to line or counterattack. Such a barrage where he has to block, but the next attack is already coming his way. While in this state, Okita moves even faster, so fast that Hanal can't even tell what's going on. Hermes takes that the Susanoo Shinrai Yorozu is evolving even further as he fights, but Okita is going even further than that evolution. A good comparison to this is when a serious Poseidon attacks Kojiro with his, thrust technique, and Heimdall couldn't even see it, or he couldn't even see the 40-day flood. Ares stated that his moves are too fast for even him to make out, and he made like a giant dome. Zeus states that it is impossible to move like that and make them continuous barrages, an attack that Okita has surpassed humanity at this point, the limits that humanity has been placed on. Okita's crew questioned what's going on and asked did the Tengen Ryu style have techniques like that. Kondo explains that each attack is a killing blow, and that every attack should be capable of finishing your enemy. To combine them into like a series of onslaughts should be impossible to move in that way. Okita on his deathbed collected and refined more than 80 techniques, despite creating them while on his deathbed. Solely from his imagination, he was able to craft techniques that exceeded all limits of human ability. His sword extended beyond human logic, and it flew as high as the heavens. It is said it surpassed all limits, surpassing even death. His blade arriving at the ultimate peak, a black kite heaven returned. Okita is said to reach the peak of the sword, and that is the peak nobody but him has managed to reach. Now you can take this in two ways. It means that he reached the peak of swordsmanship as a whole, or he reached the peak of a sword style he used in which is said to be the strongest in terms of close combat. Susanoo acknowledged him as the absolute greatest. Okita then unleashed an attack that surpasses the god's speed, and surpasses humanity and pierces the boundaries between humanity and God. The Demon Claw 3-stage thrust, an attack so powerful, so fast that it destroys the divine weapon and right through Susanoo. Even though the match seemed won, Susanoo was without a weapon, he did not waver. There's different translations of this, but both come out to be the same meaning. His speed transcends the gods, or you can interpret it as the gods as a whole, or all the gods that have fought in the tournament and the gods that we've seen fought in said tournament. So you can take it as meaning gods like Buff, Zeus, Beelzebub, Hades, and Poseidon, those gods that fought in this tournament, and you can apply that statement to referring to them and not all the gods as a whole, not like Odin, for example, or because we haven't seen him fight yet. Susanoo not being pushed into a corner himself has finally reached it, an invisible sword. For those who continue to love the sword above all others, a miracle can be performed. And by simply swinging his arms down in a sword-like manner, the sword was able to cut through Okita's bones without touching him. Susanoo has finally reached his own swordsmanship peak, the peak of swordsmanship, Musoken, the unarmed sword. To those who master the sword, a feat like this seems to be an unachievable dream, but to those that did it do exist. However, when they achieved this said feat, they died. To achieve this feat requires surpassing human limits and in the realm of the gods. Susanoo has surpassed Okita yet again, but his will to fight has not wavered. After swinging his sword for eons, his blade had reached such an earnestness and has slacked up to the ultimate peak that has reached the realm of the supreme god. With this technique, it allowed him to ignore conventional durability and cut you from the inside out. Now you can take these statements to mean different ways. That first, the ultimate peak of swords, Susanoo is either the strongest swordsman in terms of skill or the strongest swordsman overall to the skill and power. Now, reaching the realm of the Supreme God, you can take this as either he grew strong enough by evolving in battle to reach this said tier, or by unlocking Musoken, this skill allowed him to reach and elevate to the realm of the Supreme God. No, into the stance is supposed to be a one-hit kill overhead position, and Okita begins to head right into the attack. But even after taking a hit, on the verge of dying, by hearing his comrades and mustered the strength to push onward, even though Susanoo was about to deliver the killing blow, it was a little too late, and Heavenly Flight 3-stage thrust defeated the Sword God. Hermes explains the reason he survived the instant kill attack by Musoken was he drew back slightly, which made the attack hit off by a hair. To a swordsman who has seen countless killing blows, seeing once the attack was efficient enough. His final attack was not a slash or a thrust, but a move that was the same as Ami no Noregeshi, a sword technique, a technique made by a god. So basically, Hermes and Zeus are basically saying that throughout the countless battles Okita has been, that just by seeing an attack once, he's able to counter it. And that by slightly moving himself out the way as the attack was coming towards him, he was able to survive the killing blow. Now, with that out the way, the question still asks, the question still beckons. Is he really the greatest swordsman? Is Okita truly the greatest swordsman? Both are called the greatest in their eras. Kojiro during the Sengoku era, and Okita during the Bakumatsu era. Kojiro is straight up called the greatest swordsman, while Okita is called the greatest manslayer, which is an art of sword killing that was made in a time where swordsmanship was at its strongest. So you can take as Kojiro outright being the strongest swordsman, and regardless of the era, and ignoring that swordsmanship as an art got stronger and he would still be the strongest, or because the era in which the man had mastered how the sword was made to the peak in which the god of the sword himself called that era was the strongest, and Okita was the strongest and most skilled of them all. You can say that, well, Okita would still be the strongest regardless of that set statement by Kojiro. You can say the scanning ability would still work on Okita if Okita draws a fight out long enough, and Kojiro is just going to scan deeper and deeper until he finally reaches Okita and defeats him. But Okita has he not has faced someone like that, but he scales above his comrades who has faced people that can read opponents and predict their next movements. So him being the most skilled swordsman of that time, he scales above other swordsmen of that time who are masters in said crafts, who can read opponents' movements before they can even move or perceive what's going to happen. This should be nothing for him that he can't handle or find a way to round. I guess you can say the way this fight will play out is that it'll be base Red Eyes Okita versus base Kojiro, and Okita will more than likely go for a blitz. Okita has no reason to just stand there and wait like Poseidon does, since Poseidon is arrogant and he is not. And since he's going to attack off the gate, and while Kojiro is scanning his movements as he enters the ring, Okita's going to start off at in round 10 blitz. How he blitzed Ares so hard he disappeared off the map. And the only thing base Kojiro did while scanning was being fast enough where Ares said that, oh, he's really fast, but not to a point where he blitzed Ares' perception. And even if you were to say that Kojiro is like I said, scanning Okita, is not going to be enough where it's going to overwhelm Okita to where he can just still amplify his speed to move even faster, like we see in the fight with Poseidon. Even though he was being red, he was still able to bring out more speed and overwhelm Kojiro that way. So you can say the fight would end this, where Okita uses more of his speed and he overwhelms Kojiro and defeats him. But let's say that this doesn't happen. But let's say that this doesn't happen and Kojiro was given more time to scan. We get into the mid-match Kojiro, where he transcends humanity and reaches the realm of the gods, where he fully scans Poseidon and he moves so fast that Poseidon couldn't keep up with him. That Kojiro is going on another tier than Okita that's being shown, and Okita would just be defeated at that point. But then let's say Okita enters his Red Eyes Demon Child form in his fight in this version of Kojiro. How this fight play out. With his speed and power on another level, you can argue various attacks that are more extreme, and he uses more of his skill because overall Okita is more skilled than the two. But still, it wouldn't be enough to like beat this version of Kojiro since he's like so much steps ahead in terms of like his scanning. Since he reached a point where this version of Okita's fighting skill will not be enough, but he still has the speed. But he would just be predicting him, and like in the prediction would just give Kojiro the edge. Now, if we use Blue Eyes Imperial Okita versus Mid-Fight Kojiro, it gets more interesting since they both have statements of transcending humanity, but when it comes down to speed, that's when it comes to toss-up. Okita has like his 80s style techniques when it was blitzing Heimdall to the point where he couldn't even see what was going on anymore. And although Susanoo Shinrai Yoyozu was evolving mid-fight, Okita was like getting stronger than that and like pushing further than his Shinrai Yoyozu. Like I said earlier in the video, Poseidon's first strike was so fast that it like completely blitzed Heimdall. And like even if Kojiro saw it, even when he saw it, he could not react in time to the attack. Okita will be overwhelming Kojiro to the point where he can't like focus on his scanning ability and gets like faster and faster while overwhelming him. At this point, Okita will just like overpower and win that way. You can argue that they are equal in terms of speed since 40-Day Flood and Okita's 80 Silverman style barrage is comparable, but Okita would just be like a bit more faster than that. And he's like using like 80 different styles, and he's like switching up these different style techniques, different swords techniques. So Kojiro's like gonna be like having a hard time like scanning the sets like sword styles while being like overwhelmed. Now, Blue Eyes Imperial Okita versus Full Scan All of Creation Ninrain Genryu Kojiro is where it gets a little more of interpretation of how you use the statements and scaling. Kojiro Scan All of Creation is still the techniques of the gods. Blitz Poseidon so hard when he uses 40-Day Flood, he can just casually like kill him. So you can argue that the speed gap is like big enough that Okita will just get like overwhelmed and defeated. You can also use Okita defeating Musoki and Susanoo, who reached the realm of the Supreme God. And by using this, Poseidon does not have like a similar statement to this and as an argument, unless you say that he's compared with the Zeus and that he's feared as like the Zeus of the seas. You can use that to argue he's on the same tier as like the Supreme God that way, but you can say that Okita surpassed this Susanoo and he would be on that level if you like want to go down that route. Also, if Okita and Kojiro are all on the same tier as speed and it's not like a blitz difference, Okita can like evade the attack since he's been in countless life and death matches and seen like countless killing blows at the same moves won't work on him the same way before. And as I said like again in the video earlier, that you can use the fact that Okita is on another whole level of skill than his comrades who's fought someone who's had like a similar ability to Kojiro. So it's not going to be like outright to like say he's going to be like completely scanned and like overwhelmed like that way, and that Okita can just like throw Kojiro's scan ability off like once again, and by using his speed more, he can like overwhelm like Kojiro and like defeat him that way. You can make the argument as well that the 80 style difference is using in the fight is that it's constantly switching his sword styles each instance after using them, so it's moving so fast it's becoming like hard for Kojiro to adapt. You can say it will be able to disturb the scanning ability, and Kojiro will not be able to like really scan him, while Okita is like getting faster as he's like doing this. But this fight comes down to really interpretation on Okita and Kojiro and how you argue them, especially in like these forms that they are in at this point. Narratively, both have arguments for being like the strongest or like the greatest swordsman. Okita doing to who he fights as the strongest swordsman in Valhalla, and the one who like reached the peak of swordsmanship, Susanoo, and the era he lived in with swordsmanship like reached its peak. Okita does have the showings and narrative of being like the more skilled out of the two, as well as we use like the anime statements again, like Brunhilde and Heimdall calling him the greatest swordsman in all of humanity. Now, if we're going to use the statement of Hades being like the strongest of like the gods, like the strongest in terms of like being stronger than Zeus, Poseidon, which is said in the anime, if we're going to use that, why not can't we use the same thing for Okita? Now, if we're going to use statements on Hades, who is outright being called in the anime the strongest out of like the Greek gods, involving like Zeus and Poseidon, why can't we use the same thing for Okita from the anime? And then we have Kojiro, due to his growth in combat and scanning ability, allowing him to read his opponent's movements and surpassing them mid-fight, while growing stronger as the battle goes on, and learning his opponent's movements. And with the fact that even in like when he died, he continued to train and learn, overcome his like previous foes, and like adapt to the point where he can like completely like overcome them. He still like continued his training and further his swordsmanship as from the blade. And then we got Kojiro here, who grown in combat and then we have Kojiro here due to his growth in combat and scanning ability, allowing him to read his opponent's movements and surpassing them mid-fight, while growing stronger in battle by learning his opponent's movements and how they move. And even when he like died, he like still learned and trained to become like an even better swordsman than he was when he was alive, by facing his opponents, like his previous foes, hundreds if not thousands of tens of thousands of times over and over again, and further polishing his use of the blade, and to become a swordsman who reached enlightenment among like swordsmen. With everything being said here, and I guess the way you interpret it, it all depends on like how you interpret this fight. There's different arguments for like both characters being like the greatest swordsman, and there's like no bias here, like no favoritism being shown between these characters. I'm giving these characters like the most fair breakdown, like how the fight will go down, and how like narratively and like power scaling wise they have statements saying that they are like the greatest, and for reasons why they are the greatest swordsmen. If you liked the video, but that's the end of the video. This is the battle of a true great swordsman, and I really have fun doing it. I want to say thanks to like my friend Kane on Discord for helping me with this video. We had like a really good time like breaking down like how this fight would go down, and I want to thank him for like helping me out on this. If you like the video, please hit like, channel, subscribe, and comment down below, and stay tuned for more videos when they come out, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.